Hello, I would like to welcome everyone watching us this morning to the 9th webinar in the AirCOVID series, which is part of the Airport Infra Expo platform. My name is Ricardo Fenelon. I am a partner at the law firm Fenelon Advogados, and I have combined with forces with NECTA for this project. Today, we will discuss the impacts of COVID-19 and the future of aviation in Latin America with Fabio Rabbani, Regional Director of the International Civil Aviation Organization South American Office, John Watret, Worldwide Chancellor at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, Rafael Echevarne, Director General of ACI Airports Council International Latin America, and I will be the moderator. Welcome, Fabio, John, and Rafael. The issues we will address include terminations, wage, and working hour reductions. How is the market dealing with the crisis? How to convince passengers that flying is safe, and how to balance new measures and the system's efficiency.
Change to this camera.
And of course, what is the future of aviation in Latin America? Our viewers are welcome to send questions through the chat function. Let's begin. We always start the webinars by asking our guests for some introductory remarks about the impacts of COVID-19 on the aviation sector in general and on the specific markets they work in. Fabio, would you mind taking this first?
Thank you very much, Ricardo. First of all, let me congratulate you, Paula, and all your team on this effort in trying to raise awareness about the situation that we're facing right now. At the same time that we're dealing with unprecedented crisis, we're dealing also with a great part of the economic sectors being impacted by some situation that has not allowed minimal movement throughout between countries, within countries, and naturally it has impacted companies, airlines, airports, and even civil aviation authorities. The numbers are appalling in the sense that we have never seen in the past impacts and numbers dropping down so dramatically as we have seen so far. The expectations for the overall impact of aviation in 2020 go beyond 60% or even around 60% of a movement drop. And naturally, these are incomes for airlines, these are incomes for airports, and the impacts on wages we already have seen. So a great part of the airlines are already reducing wages and, unfortunately, in some cases, laying off people. In Latin America, we have 7.2 million people directly or indirectly contracted due to aviation, due to the aviation sector. So the expectations are not that good when you look into the numbers. However, this seems to be a very temporary, momentary crisis. And this is the opportunity that we have to build up an aviation that's stronger and healthier in the sense of being able to deal with crises like this. They will probably not be the only one, but I'm sure that in this sense, we're coming out on the other side a lot stronger than we were before. These are my initial remarks. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Fabio. John, what are your thoughts?
Well, thank you. Thank you for being invited to be part of this panel. And I'm coming from the education and training part of it, because I'm Chancellor of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, which is part of a system. There's I'm the Chancellor of the Worldwide Campus. We've got a residential campus in Daytona Beach and a residential campus in Prescott, Arizona. And it's the two residential campuses that have the flight programs that we offer. But we've got over 100 degree programs that we offer in the aviation aerospace industry in support of this great industry that we are serving. You know, the COVID-19 really, it hit us hard right in the middle of our term. Everything was going as normal, and then the students went off for spring break and didn't return. That was, we had to change everything to remote learning for the residential campuses. And so it really has been devastating for the education as a whole. But fortunately, Embry-Riddle, and I'll go into that in more detail later, is that the COVID has provided an opportunity to use what Embry-Riddle has been doing for a while, is online remote learning. And we've been able to transfer to that to help support the industry. But, you know, I always say the aviation industry is resilient. We were hit hard. If you look over the years, you know, there's been other crises that we have weathered through, and the industry continues to grow.
Thank you, John. Rafael, what about you?
Okay, well, thank you very much for the invite. Just basically tagging along what Fabio and John have already said. Indeed, this situation that we are living, we can say that in the past we've actually recovered from crisis. The thing is that, of course, the crisis that we had in the past pale in comparison to the crisis that we are living today. It is basically the perfect storm that we are actually going through. One of the concerns of my organization is not, of course, the dire situation that we are in right now, but the ensuing economic recession that is settling, and that we haven't actually seen the entirety of it, the magnitude of it. Hopefully we will be partially wrong on that. And, you know, as John and Fabio were saying, we are resilient, we will get through it. But one thing that I would like to say, you know, it's actually true that, you know, we will come stronger. The thing is that, of course, we have to take the steps to ensure that we come stronger. And that is actually something that when we engage with governments, we keep on saying, you know, it shouldn't be just an empty sentence, an empty phrase. It has to have substance. And that means action must be taken. I think that there are signs that things are changing. For example, the speed at which ICAO worked with industry to come up with documentation, it had never happened before, that within a matter of weeks, not regulations, but actually documents actually suggesting steps came out, is something to be applauded. So we are, you know, we are hopeful that we will get through, but of course we have to work hard.
Thank you, Rafael. Fabio, can you tell us a little bit about what is happening in ICAO since the crisis started?
Sure, Ricardo. So the first thing that has happened, and I must follow on what Rafael has mentioned, we recognize that nothing could be done alone, and we had to work together. This was after the first impact and the shock that we had to face with regards to the whole lockdown situation, was to actually recognize that we did not know enough about what was coming and what was happening. And having to work together was, I think it's a first gain from all this situation. This is the part of the opportunity that I'm raising from all of this. So recognizing this, whatever I say from now on, it has been done together with the industry, the states, and guaranteeing that we can engage academy and other stakeholders in making sure that our response is as quick as possible to this situation. So there was the first level of activities related to the initial response. Remember that we had lockdowns and states, countries closing down their borders, and we had repatriation flights, we had cargo flights that should not have stopped. So all these actions were related to this initial response. So we guaranteed the proper aeronautical communications. We guarantee the proper guidance with regards to licenses and certificates that naturally would be impacted due to the impossibility from the civil aviation authorities to renew the certificates. So we did a lot of work with the states guaranteeing that they had the proper risk analysis to see if they could or could not extend these certificates. We also coordinated these repatriation and humanitarian flights within the regions. And there were a lot of guidelines with regards to the operations of cargo flights, which were naturally something that had to continue no matter what. And we have to remember that even though we did this work, a great part of the flights or the cargo is transported by passenger flights on the belly of the aircraft. So this is something that also had to be done in working with the states and the industry to guarantee the proper guidelines for having that makeover for the aircraft to transport cargo in their passenger cabins. So there were a lot of initial responses, activities that were done. On the other hand, we had to start building the right policies for the states to address this situation. So the guidance that ICAO has started working with the industry and the states was directly related to being able to, once the country and the health organizations would allow the states to reopen their borders, to actually have the aviation ready to restart their operations. So this has been done both globally and regionally. And as it was mentioned by Rafael, also we have a lot of efforts done with the ICAO Council and the Secretariat to build documents, guidelines with regards to these policies, and also operational documents. Remember that we continue to look into safety, security, and now health issues that have to be addressed directly and very quickly, in the sense of having the correct guidelines and orientation to everyone to use a more and the most harmonized procedures as possible. We have faced this discussion in the past, as you know well, Ricardo. This is something, for example, for aviation security. Since 2001, once the measures, the screening processes have increased, we have, as aviation industry and the states, struggled a lot on harmonizing our procedures and guaranteeing the most facilitation in the aviation sector. We cannot bear this with this situation, and we have to find the best ways to guarantee that the health protocols are implemented temporarily for this situation are as harmonized as possible. And that is why ICAO, together with the states and the industry, have prepared guidelines on this sense. And regionally, we have put all our states and the local industry together to guarantee that we have awareness and knowledge about this. So we have built our protocols based on the information we have and gather all the global guidelines now to guarantee that not only we had a document, but actually had personnel ready to interpret, analyze, and once the decision from the country is made to reopen their borders, they're able to evaluate what's the risk and what are the current and correct measures that should be adopted. Just to finalize my comments, remember that aviation has been always data-driven. We should be proud on this and always working on a risk assessment and risk analysis before making decisions. We cannot bear to have regulations that are not doable, useful, and actually sustainable throughout time whenever they're necessary. So we have to be reasonable in this sense, and ICAO Council has been very specific on this policy matter. We should recognize that a lot of these measures are temporary and should be addressed on a risk-based analysis. Over to you, Ricardo.
Thank you, Fabio. I imagine must have been a huge challenge because usually ICAO works in a larger, like it takes more time. It needs consensus, and the crisis is so huge that all these decisions have been made in a short period. Not usual for ICAO. John, how does Embry-Riddle expect to be affected by the changes imposed by the coronavirus crisis? Do you think? Do you think it will affect the number of new enrollments?
As we go through and look at the planning for this coming fall, because as indicated, we closed down our 2 residential campuses in mid-March and then moved to completely remote training. We completed that semester, and one of the great things about Embry-Riddle, because we've got this worldwide campus that has a very strong online delivery capability, and #1 in the nation in terms of US News and World Report, we were able to transfer that and keep the students continuing through. We also, for as long as we could continue our flight training until the governor's executive order closed down the state completely, and then we had to cease the flight training. But once we went into phase 1 of opening again, we've started up our flight training process again. During the summer, we're delivering all our courses online. We've got over 9,000 students that are taking courses online, and then through all the programs that we offer, continue with the flight program in both our residential campuses. As we look to the future, we're looking in what we call Summer B. So starting July 1, we're looking to actually open up our campus again and bring the students back to face-to-face classes with social distancing and all the safety protocols in place. And then the early indicator is that we've been talking to students. The students are looking to come back and do it. We are making sure that the dormitories are single occupancy dormitories for the summer. As we go into the fall, and that's when we'll open up completely, we're optimistic that things are going to turn around. The early indicators were just going to be slightly down on our enrollments in our Daytona Beach campus, and we're on track for enrollments holding in our Prescott campus. And then in the worldwide organization, because it's a distributed model and it's online, our enrollments have started to increase. Because one thing that happens during any crisis where the unemployment goes up and the economy goes down, education comes into play. People come back to look at education and look to the future beyond the immediate crisis. So we've seen in the online environment some increase in it. So we're continuing to monitor what ICAO is doing, monitor what the FAA is doing, monitoring what all the other agencies are doing, so that we can meet the demands of industry and address some of those safety, security, and all the other issues that's going to come into play as the industry starts to come back and do it. So as we look at it, we're optimistic that our enrollments will hold. We'll be able to hold the classes as we have in the past, with obviously looking at some restrictions that we put in place for safety reasons. All the other indicators are that students are still interested in the aviation industry. The aviation is a career choice of many. So it may be 2-3 years, but I think the future looks good for us to come back, and the interest in aviation in terms of the university is still holding strong at the moment.
Thank you, John. Rafael, I think you have a very good thermometer about what is happening in Latin America, because you represent many airports in the region. How do you see the impacts of this crisis? They were like similar in every country. Do you have like different examples? Can you talk more specifically about the impacts on each airport?
Yes. Yes, indeed. It is true that the situation is different. I mean, we could actually talk about 3 different cases. On the one hand, we have the situation in Mexico. Mexico is very interesting because it's the only country in the world that we know of that didn't impose any type of restrictions on travel. Okay, as I say, the only case in the world that we are aware of. Another story, of course, is did airlines continue to fly? That's of course a commercial decision, okay? But that is actually the most extreme case in terms of actually letting things continue as they were before, okay? Then we have the case of Brazil and Chile, which are countries where domestic aviation continued, okay? Once again, you know, depending on the commercial decision of the airlines. If I understand correctly, in the case of Brazil, it was freer than in Chile, in the sense that in Chile, there were some sort of justifications that you had to actually provide for flying and so on, but domestic aviation still was operating. And then we have the rest of the countries where there was an absolute total closure, basically a total closure of operations. I mean, extreme examples would be the case of Colombia, sorry, not extreme, but I mean, examples would be Colombia, Argentina, and so on, you know, where there is, and I'm mentioning those two countries and Peru, countries which are very large, that actually depend very much on aviation, but where aviation came to a halt, okay? With the exception, of course, of cargo and some humanitarian relief flights. I think it's very important to point out that airports didn't actually shut down, because as I say, air cargo continued to operate, okay? And I'm mentioning that because, you know, that means that there are some ongoing costs, okay, for the airports. But anyway, now we see that some countries, considering the incredible socioeconomic pressure that there is, are starting to open up, okay? And I would like to point out the case of Ecuador, where they actually have said, okay, we can restart both domestic and international aviation. Okay, there are some measures that are in place, like, for example, imposing quarantines for people coming from abroad, but still, you know, airlines seem to be picking up activity there, and there are already international flights, okay? And then we have situations where countries like, in particular, Argentina, have said that international flights will not come back until September. In Colombia, there is actually right now that is a situation as well. And as you can see, there are differences within the region. One of the concerns that we have is that some countries are not very clear in deciding what is going to happen. One of the ones that I am particularly interested in is the case of Panama with relation to COPA. And why do I say that? I say that because COPA is so incredibly important for not only Panama, but actually for the other countries in the region, because it actually opened up the possibility for secondary cities to be connected to the world, rather than actually having to go through their main hubs, their main cities, okay? Now, impact. The impact, despite the fact that there were operations in some of these countries that I was telling you about, the drop in traffic has been over 90%. I mean, some people tell me, well, tell me it's 95 or 96. Well, it doesn't really matter. You know, when you have dropped more than 50% of the traffic, it doesn't really matter if it's 95 or 97%. It is dramatic, okay, dramatic. The point here, of course, is how soon we will restart and how long it will take to go back to the previous year's numbers and the trend. And we actually were having a discussion right immediately before this meeting with what we call the World Economic Committee for ACI, which is a group of economists. Basically, we are saying that, which is very much along the lines of what ICAO has said, we will get to pre-COVID levels at around the year 2023, if everything goes according to plan, and 10 years to get back to the trend line. In other words, you know, if we kept on going from 2019 at the 5% growth rate, it will take 10 years to reach that point. That, of course, is on the basis of the data that we have right now. Okay, and as I was saying before, you know, it will all depend on the economic recession. My concern, in particular for my part of the world, is that the IMF and the World Bank are forecasting that Latin America will have the lowest growth of the whole world, you know, next year. And, you know, so that those are my sort of concerns that I have, but that is the situation today. So right now, in the first quarter of 2020, just in the first 3 months, we lost about 40 million passengers. We lost 700, we ceased in terms of revenues, we actually reduced revenues by 700 million. We forecast that this year, at least 50% drop in traffic versus the previous year, and approximately $5 billion less revenue. And actually, we are reviewing those figures right now.
Thank you, Rafael. Usually in these webinars, I always go a little bit off script, so you don't get very comfortable. But I think it will be fine because all of you have a lot of experience in the aviation sector. Yesterday, I was reading, like Fortune surveyed the CEOs of the 2020 Fortune 500 list. And one of the questions was very interesting, and I want to know your opinion about that. When will business travel at your company return to the levels it was before the pandemic? 51% of the CEOs replied, never. It's a very high number. And a second question was, after the pandemic passes, how will the world have changed? And regarding business travel, more than 60% replied, business travel will become less frequent, replaced by video conferencing. I want to know your opinion about that. Fabio, starting with you.
Yeah, that's not a very good panorama that you drew there, Ricardo. But that's part of the discussion that we have to take into consideration. The main issue, probably with regards to these perceptions, is due to the public confidence in getting in a plane right now, or going to a foreign country, or going to a place where they don't have health support or family members, and they could be exposed to the current situation. The reality of looking into these perceptions during a pandemic season is very dangerous and very hardly would be positive in that sense. So this is something that we have been addressing, and the main issues that we have to deal with is to generate enough information and communicate it properly with regards to the technical elements of the risks associated in flight travel right now. Air travel should not be condemned to the most dangerous circumstances that you could be exposed to. Not because you have an aircraft that doesn't have a window that opens, but remember that we have technological resources, procedures, measures, and the whole aircraft cabin is protected somehow by the airflow that's constantly recirculated within the aircraft. If I'm not mistaken, besides the HEPA filters, you have a rate of change of air within an aircraft every 3 to 4 minutes. So these are elements that have to be built on data and information, because public confidence right now, in general, not only for aviation, is very affected by the scare that's been generated due to this pandemic situation and outbreak. So the lessons learned throughout these processes are very important. For example, as Rafael mentioned, we have some countries now throughout the world, not only in South America, not only in Latin America, that are reopening their operations. We had already expected that these states, these countries, would have more restrictive measures once they reopen. So what they have done, they have implemented quarantine in some cases. It's not something that we advocate. We understand there are issues and concerns with regards to this, but that was something that was somewhat expected to generate some trust. The good part of that is that we can collect data from this and see what was the rate of transmission within a flight. If one person, that naturally we will have people that are sick or are contaminated that will get in a flight. How many people actually were infected throughout the travel? This is a kind of data information that has to be built on to generate public trust and confidence that gradually will reduce these concerns. I think we should, if you do this this survey in a couple of months, 2, 3, 4 months from now, and the situation is more controlled, probably we'll see better numbers. But that's something that's a challenge. And this is something that's part of the policies that ICAO and the ICAO Council with the Secretariat have been addressing. So generate information and communicate that properly. Over to you, Ricardo.
Thank you, John. Before you answer, I just want to add something because I think it's related. How is the impact of COVID-19 on students' motivation to pursue aviation-related university degrees? Because if like the number of flights and passengers are not going to be the same, how will this impact students' motivations?
Motivation, I think, I mean, the passion for aviation is always there. I mean, I think that is still there, and I still think that the young people still have that passion to do it. In the near term, it is going to impact it, because one of the things is you've got young people coming to university, and it's not that we see that the young people are enthusiastic and eager to get to college. You know, their life has been turned upside down. The middle of March, their life stopped in terms of school was stopped to high school, whatever. They were online, they were staying at home. Now they're looking to get back to college, get out of, you know, from under parents and things like that. But the parents are looking at the safety of sending their sons and daughters to a college environment, because when you think about it, I mean, a dormitory on a college campus is essentially a cruise ship on land. I mean, it's a close area to do it. So by putting in protocols and safety issues, we're making sure, and so that we can build that confidence up, similar to what we're just talking about in getting the air travel back again, is that we want to show that we're doing the right thing that students can come and have a safe and environment to be in and study in doing it. In terms of the big part that we're seeing is our international student numbers coming in, because for one, you know, the airlines are not flying. A lot of the international airlines are not flying. There's restrictions coming in from certain countries into the US and out of the US. We're also seeing that embassies are not fully open functional yet, so they can't get the students can't get the travel documents that are required to come in. So that part of has to start opening up, as well as the airlines themselves, to see the impact of what's going to how the US education and Embry-Riddle for aviation education is going to be impacted into the future by getting the international students coming in. In terms of the university, we are a global university. I mean, we've got offices in São Paulo, Brazil. We've got Singapore, all over Asia, Europe, and the US. We did have a large travel. We traveled to meet sending faculty overseas to teach the courses. Administrators were moving back and forth. We are going to pull back on that initially and use Zoom and video conferencing to have those meetings rather than send people to the locations. But eventually, you know, you can only do so much with Zoom. You know, it is important, and we are such, you know, the society as is, you know, we do need to have face-to-face meetings sometimes. So I think eventually, you know, the near term, there'll be fewer business travels, but in the longer term, I think as things start to get past and whether it's vaccines or whatever protocols are in place, I think people will start to travel, and then it'll come back to that business opportunity. It might not be the same levels in the short term, but it will get back.
Thank you, John. Rafael, your comments. You are very impacted by this.
Yes, no, I mean, I agree with what Fabio and John said. On the one hand, Fabio said something that I totally agree with, that, you know, the surveys, you know, that you do right now reflect a situation where people are nervous, where people are concerned, and so it is perfectly understandable. it happen always, you know, when you do these sort of things. In terms of the impact of technology on travel, well, you know, probably it will have an impact, I think, for those one-day meetings or whatever, you know. I mean, you know, that can have an impact. I think that we can expect that, but in the long term, of course, you know, it's going to be very difficult to tell right now what's happening. What I think is very important is one, that whatever measures are implemented for air travel right now to deal with the pandemic have to be, as Fabio was saying before, temporary measures, okay? And we have to reevaluate them as we go along. I think that one of the big, if I can say, failures of coming out of September 11th was the fact that some of the measures that were implemented have lingered on and are really questionable. And I think that in some meetings that we had with Fabio, I think that people were saying, listen, you know, the fact that you have to remove shoes in one place and not in other places, you know, that is an example of those sort of measures that were maybe necessary at the time, but they have lingered on. And the important thing here is that technology actually is available to overcome the inconvenience for the passengers. So I think it's very important to keep an eye on that, you know, measures today doesn't mean that have to be forever, okay? The interesting thing though is that the measures that we have to actually implement now for air travel are not necessarily that expensive, okay? I mean, really at the end of the day, if you look at what ICAO and ACI and IATA have recommended, the measures are pretty much straightforward. Face mask, you know, physical distancing and cleaning, okay? I mean, that it comes down to that. You know, it doesn't mean huge investments, but having said that, technology is there to actually ensure that this is reinforced. Many airports and airlines were already investing in those things. I think that the important thing is to encourage governments to open up to technologies. I can tell you, like a few months before I joined my current position, I was in charge of airports in Jamaica, and the government was implementing facial recognition technology to enter the country, okay? And of course, there was hesitation there in other countries. Now it happens that facial recognition technology is actually exactly the same what we need to prevent actual contact, you know? So those sort of things are the things that actually could be a boost for the real implementation of technology, and we do encourage that. So yeah, those are my views.
Thank you, Rafael. We have two questions here from our viewers. First to John. Fernando Capuano said, Ricardo, please ask John if Embry-Riddle will increase management courses online.
We will, and all our courses are now going to be developed online and available online. So similar to both for academic purposes to achieve a degree, you can a bachelor's degree or master's degree in aviation management, but also we're going to increase the certificate courses similar to the one that we deliver into Brazil with CNT and Aviation and Sasnat. That it's a consortium of airlines that we're in our 5th cohort, and it's a 14-month aviation management certificate that the employees of the 3 airlines go through, and it's been very successful. So that is, and management is going to be a key part of recovering from this as well. It's not just all the flying and the pilots and the maintenance. There is the management aspect of it to go forward. So we will be continuing to look at that and meet the demands of industry as it goes forward. And it's like webinars like this and talking to industry that we see the demand and respond to it.
Thank you. The other question is to Fabio, but if Rafael could also comment, Mr. Jorge Kawaja, I'm sorry for the pronunciation. Good morning to all, to Mr. Rabbani. Is ICAO working with common rulings to South American countries with respect to local authorities in order to make international flights available? I think he wants to know if ICAO has something like a common rule to all South American and Latin American countries, something to bring some uniformity? I think that is the question, Fabio.
Okay. So this is well, it has many folds behind that. What I can explain, first of all, we have to be very careful with regards to respecting each country's sovereignty in this process. What we're simulating throughout all these activities that we have done so far is try to harmonize as much as possible the actions that are adopted in this initial response to the crisis. So what we have done in South America was to, first of all, get all the states and director generals and the industry together to evaluate what are the main risks and the concerns that we have, prioritize the actions that we had to draw on, and we drew a strategic framework based on these concerns and the priorities that were identified. Luckily, and I think it would be not more than rational that what we drew in South America later on was confirmed a lot by the global guidelines that we received from our council, and we adjusted what was necessary. And in this sense, we have worked a lot in guaranteeing the proper risk analysis. We have guaranteed and worked with the states to draw the health protocols, as Rafael mentioned, a lot based on simple measures that are rational to this extent that this crisis needs. We're talking about distancing, we're talking about sanitizing, we're talking about personal protection equipment, we're talking about the use of technologies and procedures overall to guarantee that the health protocols are as harmonized as possible. But with regards to the decision-making process, this is something that's important, and maybe the question is also with regards to this, what's the level of coordination, for example, for a reopen process, for reopening the borders, and not only South America, but naturally throughout the whole world. We must remind that we have a very strong interregional traffic, but we also have a very relevant traffic outside South America. So the level of harmonization and border control have to be as harmonized as possible. Well, this decision is not that simple, and we have to look into the decision process within each country. So in some countries, this decision is made by health organizations. In some other countries, they have built crisis committees, crisis groups that have been deciding based on the information we have. And in some cases, the Civil Aviation Authority has their position placed in these discussions. But this is not just a simple linear decision-making process within each state, within each country. So what we're doing as much as possible right now is provide enough knowledge and information so the decision-making is as informed as possible. And this is something that we have been working on through these last months with the states, guaranteeing that they understand the risks that are associated. What's the risk of reopening? For example, if you have flights and you have 95% of your flights grounded or aircraft grounded in your country, what are the risks that have to be evaluated in the change management of a grounded situation to a restart operations? And these are things that give also confidence and institutional confidence to the states to build on this kind of knowledge. One thing that was, and that will be my last point before I'll hand over to Rafael. This is something that we're looking to, and I was discussing this last week with a risk analysis organization, was how do we build institutional resilience? And naturally, the organizations, the private organizations, they have to build based on a lot of the measures, the economic measures they have to adopt, but also the organizations within the public sector that have to understand that there's a big challenge coming over with regards to all the income and the capacity to do their normal, regular activities. We cannot incur in the errors of the past in getting an oversight regulator sector that cannot be oversighted later on. We cannot implement measures that are too overburdened to a system that's already fragilized based only on perceptions. So these are actions that we're building on to guarantee that the states, under their own decision-making process, have enough information to build on this. And we have been seeing results. As it was mentioned, we already have Brazil and Chile open, but we also have Bolivia and Ecuador reopening their traffic in the past week. And we have the expectation to have some other states moving forward. And some of them even reconsidering the decisions that have made to postpone their reopening process throughout the time. We cannot push the states to do it, but we can provide them enough information and knowledge about what's going on so they can make the right decision. Over to you, Ricardo, maybe Rafael.
Rafael, I just want to add something before you comment. Usually airlines, they plan like for 5 years, 10 years, and now they are trying to plan for 1 week, 15 days. Would it be good to have something like we have now in the European Union, that the countries seem to do like some planning together? Not because, for example, now in Brazil, we don't accept any foreigner. For the last 60 days or more, it has been like that. So would it be good to have some more uniformity in the region? How do you see that?
Yeah, well, I mean, very, very good point, because for me, I don't know if you understand how my organization is set up. We actually have regional offices, and it's very interesting and frustrating for me personally to see that when, you know, whatever happens in Europe, it is done in a much more organized and a common fashion. Like, for example, the decision by the European Union to basically say, okay, by July, everything will be open, people can fly within the countries. And actually something that was taking very long, and we were very frustrated with the almost collapse of the cooperation within the European Union, slowly over the last few weeks has gone back to track and said, okay, we have to open up, okay? So we will take this coordinated effort. In Latin America, of course, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. Actually, the only thing that glues together the aviation in Latin America is ICAO, okay? And the good office of Fabio, and really he's doing an excellent job. But as Fabio says, ICAO cannot impose anything on anyone. Okay, it is up to the countries to take on board the recommendations of ICAO. So yes, I will not lie to you when I say that, yes, we are frustrated. We are frustrated with two things. One, that we see that, and it makes sense, of course, for that the health authorities are playing a very big role, and that is correct. They should be playing a big role. However, we see that after more than 2 months or 3 months of lockdown, you know, the economies and society have to get back into action, because we believe that the impact of the economic and social lockdown probably will be even worse than the potential impact of the health situation, okay? I mean, I know that these are very difficult situations, you know, and we have to be very careful. I mean, I have the privilege of actually being from an organization that represents airports, and we can be more vocal about these things. But actually, those things have to be weighed down. and so, for example, you know, we see that the health authorities are perhaps not as much aware of the economic and social impact that aviation has on Latin America. Latin America depends on aviation, full stop. There is no alternative. In the US, you have a very healthy trucking industry. You know, things go by truck from the West Coast to the East Coast, okay? In Europe, the same situation. In Europe, you can go by train, okay? In Latin America, there is no alternative. There is zero alternative. I mean, to go from, say, Medellin to Bogota, which by air takes 1 hour, by road, it takes 10 hours at least. So, you know, that is actually one of the levels of frustration. And the other levels of frustration is the fact that we see that sometimes people are reinventing the wheel, okay? And we, of course, fully understand that the authorities have to be very careful, you know, but we actually are trying to push them and say, listen, guys, this has already been done in other parts of the world, okay? Why don't we do the same thing here? You know, why don't we implement these corridors, you know, these health corridors, or whatever you want to call them, or bubbles? This is something that we really advocate very strongly towards. Having said that, of course, as you very well know, the situation in Latin America right now the number of contagions is really going through the roof. So of course, we understand that people have to be careful of all those things. But I just wrote a few days ago an article where I was saying, just think of an area of an economic activity that is not normally associated with Latin America. That's snow tourism, skiing, okay? Southern Argentina and Southern Chile, there are many communities that depend on skiing, okay? This year, probably that is going to be zero, the activity. In the case of Chile, I mean, in the context of the whole of Latin America, may not sound very important, but 30,000 people actually depend their livelihoods on the ski tourism. And mainly actually has to do with Brazilians from Sao Paulo that go to the ski resorts there, where at least 28% of the skiers come from Brazil. So, the idea of developing this kind of corridors, okay, or bubble situations, I was basically arguing, if you go to a ski resort, the ski resort is something that you can actually control. So maybe you can actually let people come there. I'm of course talking out of out of my depth here, but it's just the sort of thing, just to share with you the sort of discussions and the sort of ideas that we have, and of course, yeah, the frustration that we actually are also having, with having to be so incredibly diplomatic, So that's why I personally admire so much Fabio, because he's really amazing from that point of view.
Thank you, Rafael. I agree with you. It's very challenging. We have the same problem in the northeast of Brazil, where many communities depend on tourism. And let's see what happened. I always say that, like, so you have all these direct impacts, but it's still very hard to analyze the indirect impacts that are also huge on many other markets. John, let me get back to you. I just want to tell you that recently I had 2 education university related experiences. My wife was studying, she was pursuing her LLM at Georgetown University in DC, and she came for a spring break, never went back to DC. And also I teach air law at a Brazilian university here in Brasilia. And like, I had all this planning to teach inside the classroom, and in 1 week I had to change everything, and now we are doing through Zoom, and it's a challenging experience, especially for me. It's hard not to feel like, it's different to see the screen and not feel the student's perception inside the classroom. That said, which strategies did Embry-Riddle adopt to reduce the impacts of the COVID crisis? And how to keep the high quality education without the possibility of face-to-face classes? I'm very interested in this answer. You are on mute.
Excuse me. It's going back to Rafael. It's just for one comment. Central Florida had the same problem. I mean, all of Orlando was closed down. Disney, Universal Studios, all of that was closed down, and that travel industry is so critical to Central Florida livelihood. And so now it's slowly coming back. So that is a major part of what's going to happen in the future. In terms of the education, yeah, I mean, across the world, everything came to an end, and people were forced to go from that traditional face-to-face activity to what was initially a remote delivery. So it was you were teaching face-to-face, and suddenly you had to put everything into technology-based delivery, and having faculty who had never taught online before. And that is the difference. There's a difference between being in the classroom face-to-face interacting with students, and then being the facilitator of learning in an online environment, in a truly online environment. And an active learning online environment can be just as rewarding as what happens face-to-face, but it takes planning and delivery of it. And one thing that we have done, and we were successful in, even with our residential campuses with Prescott and Daytona, because Worldwide has got a very robust active learning online environment. So we have got a team of instructional designers, instructional coordinators, technologists, and using technology that actually create the course, working with faculty that actually create an active learning environment using the learning management system Canvas. And so the students are equally engaged in that as they are with a face-to-face course. However, it takes training, like everything else in the aviation industry and across all sectors. Training is key to doing it, and it's training both the faculty to be a facilitator of online learning, and also training the students and making sure that they understand how to use the platform, the learning management platform, to get that robust training, learning out of it. So yes, we've seen a lot of faculty struggle to go, like yourself, struggle to go from face-to-face to online. But what can be done is helping the faculty understand it and get them going. And I think we've done that for our summer sessions. We didn't cancel any summer sessions. We converted everything to our online platform, and we've got over 9,000 students taking courses now in the online environment, using faculty from a residential who traditionally taught face-to-face. We put them through a 15-day facilitated training to be able to work and teach an online platform. So again, it goes back to what we always talk about is training.
Thank you, John. Fabio, yesterday I was discussing with some friends. There was a newspaper article about the problems with who is going to enforce face coverings, masks. You have a lot of previous experience being a regulator. So if you could please comment who you think should enforce this. Do you think that countries need to regulate this issue? The article was about some labor unions in US asking the government to enact some type of regulation. And also, Fabio, I would like to ask you, new protocols will generate additional burden to the system. How can we minimize these impacts?
Perfect. This is the great question and the struggle of the regulators overall. And you also have been a regulator for a long time. So the challenge is to balance between what you actually expect and what you write down and demand from the industry and the operators overall. With this situation, I mean, we have different levels of regulation. You might have a soft regulation and you can go up to a very strict one and not even performance-based, just tell you what you have to do. And the reality is the protocols that have been designed, for example, for the health issue, and when you when you deal with masks and personal equipment and procedures and activities that people have to do, we're talking about health procedures. Maybe we have to evaluate what's the level of regulation that you want to expect. And if you say this is going to be a habit, it's going to take a little while. And this is something that has been mapped out as an issue that has to be addressed. The first countries that have been opening their traffic, they have been dealing with this. I've been in contact with the countries that have been opening their traffic recently. And this is the main issue that might lead even to unruly passengers and issues within the flights. So there's a question of how much you have to establish. And remember that we have to be very comprehensive, both with regards to how we want to design these regulations, but also understanding that people are going through a very big change in their lives. I mean, in the Western world, we're not used to wearing masks daily. We're not used to be so strict. We're so, in Latin America, believe me, we're always hugging and shaking hands and kissing and being so close to people. And suddenly we're having having to face this change of habits. So these are the concerns that we have. Civil aviation regulators will design their regulations for the operators on the civil aviation sector. Most probably health organizations are designing the regulations that are applicable to general public and even workers overall. So the balance between establishing a regulation and generating conscientious actions by each person is something that's going to be the biggest challenge. And we have been working a lot on the communications plan, for example. So communications is not guaranteeing within the country, within the state, or between states that they know what they're doing, but guaranteeing that the information from the states to the industry, from the industry to the users is as clear as possible, and also from the state to the general public is as clear as possible about the implications and why we need to address this. So this is an approach for a very soft regulation, but the reality is that the protocols, once we have seen in some countries, they have been more stricter. So they're establishing, well, you have to wear masks in an aircraft. You have to sanitize the aircraft before anyone gets in. You have to guarantee this kind of procedure if you identify someone that's possibly sick with it during the flight. And this has to be flexible throughout the time. That's the other recommendation that has been established by ICAO. Be as flexible as you can in this situation to guarantee that whatever you do not overburden the system. And in the end, you have to constantly reevaluate what has been established and see if it makes sense. So the constant and continuous justification of the regulations in this case have to be a lot more frequent than we usually have done in aviation in the past, and constantly evaluate the information, the data, and see, well, is this still useful? Is still necessary? Can we change it to a softer regulation? And gradually design this to go as normal as possible. It's not a trivial answer, and we are learning throughout this process, but what we have seen is that one of the biggest challenges within these health protocols right now is not about the airports, not about the airlines. They're doing their procedures, they're trying to adopt that, but actually generate a conscientious approach towards the general public to understand why we are doing these measures right now, why they're important, and that they have to follow on through. Aviation is not trivial. All the concerns that you have with regards to safety and security once you're on a flight, you also have with regards to the general and the passengers' behavior within and during the flight. So this is something that has to be built on communication and information a lot, besides the regulation itself. Over to you.
We are going back to safety and security next. Rafael.
Could I just comment
yeah, of course.
on Fabio's, and I just read an article actually today that United Airlines has commented about wearing masks on flights, and so that they're not going to be confrontational with the passenger. They're not going to enforce it right at that point, but they're going to take the name and keep it, that it may restrict that passenger's ability to fly in United in future flights if they don't comply. So they don't want to be confrontational right at the aircraft, but they can do it other ways to make it enforce the mask for future use.
Thank you, John. Rafael, I found the article here. Major US airlines announced increased enforcement of face coverings. And recently in some webinars, my great friend Miguel Dal, which is COO of Guarulhos Airport, which is the largest in Brazil and one of the largest in Latin America, I think second largest. He always supports some regulation because he understands that it's very hard for airports and airlines to enforce this rule. I even have a friend that he traveled last Sunday from Brasilia to São Paulo, and he told me that after people boarded the plane during the flight, they took off their masks, and it was very hard for them, like for someone to tell them to put on the mask. How you think? What do you think about that from an airport perspective?
Well, I mean, if there is something that there is commonality in the regulations that have been or the procedures or protocols have been actually suggested around the world is basically the use of face masks. I mean, as you know, even the World Health Organization now are recommending the use of face masks, which was one of the issues at the beginning that was not very clear. Okay, so as Fabio was saying, you know, I mean, we have to deal here with the cultures, you know, of the particular parts of the world. I mean, if you tell, you know, in South Korea that you have to wear a mask, you know, you wear the mask and that's it. No question about it. In my home country of Spain, if you tell them to wear a mask, well, you know, you may wear it or not, okay? And sometimes you will challenge the authority, you know, by saying, you know, I'm not wearing it just because you're telling me to wear it, okay? Anyway, but one thing that what John was saying, I think that is very important. I mean, we have to be very, very strict with this, okay? And just as passengers are asked to, you know, buckle up, you know, before takeoff and landing, you know, and everybody does, okay? Or that you switch off your computer and everybody does because there are consequences. I think that we have to deal with this the same with the wearing of the mask. One thing though is that in general, I mean, from my own personal experience in running airports, is that people tend to comply more in an aviation setting than in the streets, in the sense that there is this aura of officialdom or security or whatever you want to call it. So you will always have, of course, people who are the troublemakers, okay? And you have to be very, very stern with them. But in general, you know, if the message is clear, if you make the announcements, if the person in the security hall or when you enter the security hall tells you to wear the mask, if the guys at the X-ray machines tells you to wear the mask, and so on and so forth, you know, you have to, you know, I think that people in general comply. So yes, you know, we will have to deal with some people who are a bit unruly, but I think that if the regulations from the governments come very, very clear, I think that overall it shouldn't really be a big problem. That's my view.
Thank you. Last month, I took 6 flights because I had to travel to US, from Brazil to US. In my opinion, I'm not defending some regulation, but I think that in the end, the result is more important. We are going to need something to enforce face masks, because this is part of, Fabio spoke earlier, about convincing people that flying is safe. At least in my case, I felt safer by seeing that everyone was wearing masks inside the plane. John, my next question is for you, and I'm very interested in this question as well, because if air law is not a good business in some months, maybe I'll have to change my practice. What kind of sets of human skills will the industry need the most once it starts to recover? How do you think Embry-Riddle is able to provide it to the new students?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the skills are going to remain the same. We're still going to need pilots, and pilots are going to be trained and go through it. We're still going to need the safety aspect of it and all the safety and training of it. But we also look to new industries, unmanned aerial vehicles. I mean, what's going to be happening with that? That's another area that attracts young people into it. It's exciting for them and they do it. And that's some of the areas that we're going into it. The other part that we're seeing an increase in is aviation cybersecurity. You know, it's very much related to the aviation field. It's a broad field, but it's an area that the students are interested in, and it's a global aspect of it. And then a third one, believe it or not, is data science, business analytics, and using, you know, getting all this data that the airlines and everyone is collecting. How do you use that data to make informed decisions for the future. And those type of skill sets are increasing interest by all the students that's coming in, as well as the traditional ones, as I mentioned, being a pilot, the maintenance. We're always going to have those skills that are needed going forward, but the newer ones with cybersecurity and business analytics are the ones that are going to come in as future ones, along with unmanned aerial vehicles.
Thank you, John. Fabio, let's talk about safety and security. We have some questions here on our chat. Benildo asked, my concern, he asked and commented, my concern is aviation industry are so willing to pursue innovation and find any legal solutions for compensating their losses that they will likely compromise safety measures. And Carlos Ebner, my friend Carlos Ebner, he has a very interesting comment. Aircraft were grounded in different places. In some places, the airlines have technical staff to take care, and in some others not. What are ICAO's safety recommendations to grant a safe return to flight? So specific questions about safety, and I think ICAO's work is very important right now, Fabio. Just to give an example, last week, some people questioned me about the measure that the Brazilian civil aviation took about flexibilizing recent pilot experience. And then when I told them, no guys, see, this was discussed in ICAO by all the countries, everyone relaxed. So you have a lot of weight on these discussions. How do you see all this situation?
Yeah, these are very, very important and interesting questions that have been raised. And these are issues that have been dealt since the beginning by ICAO and in discussion with the states and the industry. So we were fully aware that civil aviation authorities and the industry would have difficulties in doing their normal processes with regards to recertification, remission of new licenses. And this has been discussed from day one to be a risk-based approach. It's not trivial. It's not something that we have, okay, all set up and said, oh, we'll follow this. Now today we do have quick reference guides that have been emitted by ICAO. Regionally, we have documents prepared by the Regional Safety Oversight Organization that have actually drew all the hazards, risks, and mitigations that could be addressed once situations like this have to be involved. So we have specific documents that have been developed to guide states with regards to these safety issues. And this goes for airworthiness, this goes for licensing, operations, airdromes. This whole package has been worked on. It doesn't mean it's fully ready, and there's a whole system behind this that was designed years ago based on the practice, the best practices and old regulations that we had, which is called the safety management system. Change management is one of the most important capacities that a regulator and the industry on SMS, on an SSP, SMS, the Safety Management System, and the Safety State Program, which are the correlated areas that guarantee a systematic approach with regard to safety, is actually the instrument that we have to mostly use right now to be able to identify the hazards and the new hazards generated by this situation. And each airline, each country might have specific themes that should be addressed as well, and be able to actually establish the risks and try to mitigate them based on these changes and these new circumstances are essential. Everything that we do, again, is data-driven. Do we have enough data with regards to this? No, it doesn't mean we're going to flexibilize regulations. It goes back to complying with the regulations overall. But it actually has to guarantee that we are able to do. Remember that the regulators also have been grounded. A lot of the inspectors cannot travel right now. A lot of the tests and evaluations cannot be done at this moment. So these concerns could not halt aviation overall. So this risk-based approach and the capacity of each operator and the civil aviation authorities in managing this situation is the most important instrument that we have. And this has been pushed throughout many years so far. And it might be just a speech, But the reality is everyone is really careful at this moment in reopening and restarting the operation. Maybe Rafael could give examples from this. The overall perception is that no one is being displicent or loose about actually moving forward with the restart of their operations. The concerns with maintenance, the concerns with training, briefings with the crews, all these actions that have been taken additionally for this restart of aviation have been very engaged within the safety management system in each operator. And the aviation authorities have been guided by ICAO with regards to what they should oversee and guarantee that in their regulations, they have the adequate instruments to apply their oversight capacities and enforcement capacities as well. Over to you, Ricardo.
Thank you, Fabio. Rafael, feel free to comment. And I also have another question to you, Rafael. What do you think governments can do to help the airports survive this crisis?
Okay, so yes, we actually are very conscious I'll talk in globally and in Latin America. In the case of Latin America, we are very conscious that governments don't have the cash that they have in other parts of the world. I mean, John knows very well the injection of $10 billion for the airport industry alone in the case of the US. That is not going to happen here. So we are very realistic, and we are not basically asking for money because it's not, we know it ain't coming, okay? As simple as that. So what we are basically asking is 3 or 4 things, very simple. One is to, if possible, I don't know if you know or the audience knows that Latin America is the part of the world with the highest percentage of airports operated by private companies, okay? You know that airport privatization is a trend around the world. Latin America is at the forefront of this for multiple reasons, okay? So one is, and these airports, these concessions, have to pay the governments, you know, for the privilege of actually running these businesses. So we are asking, okay, you know, whatever we have to pay, let us pay you later, okay? And I think that Brazil was the first country in the world to recognize the situation, to recognize the shortage of cash flow, and they said, okay, you can pay us later. Actually, in the case of Brazil, they said you can pay us at the end of the year. That's a very good thing from Brazil to do that. And we are asking that, okay, don't condone, you know, what we have to pay, okay, but we can pay later. Okay, that's number one. Number two is say, all right, you know, this shortfall in traffic, okay, was never expected. Of course, you can always have fluctuations in traffic, okay, but you have an overall trend, okay, that we can all more or less agree with. This trend has been broken, okay? So the concession period that you gave us, 10 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, whatever it is, has to be revisited to allow us concessionaires to actually recover, you know, that revenue, okay? So we are basically saying, please revisit the term of the concession, okay? Another thing that we are saying is the infrastructure, the obligations to build infrastructure that very often are associated with the privatizations, okay? That is something that can also be revisited. Obviously, there are airports, there are works that need to be done immediately. For example, you know, runway pavements or what have you, you know, that is, of course, that's a given. But there are needs for the expansion of terminal buildings or the like that perhaps can be postponed, you know, once the traffic picks up again, okay? Because we are talking here about multi-million-dollar investments, okay? And, you know, in a situation where there is no cash flow, it really hurts tremendously. And then thirdly, we are saying, you know, there are also a number of obligations that the concessionaires have in terms of the standard of the level of service that has to be provided. For example, you know, you have to manage your queues or the immigration queues in less than X minutes or whatever. Okay, in the new reality where we have this physical distancing and so on and so forth, those are the sort of things that we are also saying. Please, you know, revisit these things so that you know you don't penalize us penalized as unduly. Okay, so those are the sort of things that we are asking. In other parts of the world, of course, the situation is different. Okay, we in North America, you know, the US and in Canada, the governments have been very generous, okay, with the industry, both the airline and the airport industry. In other parts of the world, like in Europe, there are also, they're making moves to do that, okay? So, you know, we have to look at this on a regional level.
So mainly, from what I understood, you're saying that there are other forms of helping without giving direct money, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And oh, listen, I mean, don't take me wrong. Money is always welcome, okay? If anyone wants to give money to the airports or the airlines, please. Listen. But we are, you know, we are realistic. You know, we have to be, you know, we have to understand the financial reality of the countries that we deal with. And we know that in the case of Latin America in particular, or even in Africa, you know, the fact is that money is not going to come because the money isn't there, okay? So, you know, we have to live with that. But there are other mechanisms, okay, that we actually are suggesting governments to consider.
May I jump in here really quickly with regards to this? Just to give, and this is something I think it's important to say that ICAO Council has been very specific with regards to this kind of support, financial relief to the industry overall. And the guidelines are very specific in saying that these reliefs should be transparent, proportionate, targeted, and without any prejudice to fair competition. So these are things that should be taken into consideration by the states in this process as well.
I don't know what John thinks, but in my opinion, governments need to be very aware of the magnitude of this crisis. They have to try to do anything they can because they have to work to avoid the collapse of the system.
Well, I think that's been true, and as Rafael said, I mean, the US government has provided support in the early days to the industry, but a lot of that support is going to expire come October timeframe, and that's going to be when the reality hits some of the airlines here in the US. And the projection for you know, the continuing to keep the pilots employed and other employees in place after October when that expires is we're just waiting to see. So the government can do so much, but it can't continue all the time. And I agree that other ways have to be taken into account to help support the industry as it comes back onto its feet.
John, please keep your microphone on. I know we've talked a little bit about this, but I'm going to be a little bit more specific. How do you see Central and South America region right now? How do you analyze the aviation industry in the region? And how do you think this industry will react and how Embry-Riddle can help it overcome such adverse conditions?
Well, we've been fortunate in the last 2016 is when we actually opened our office in Sao Paulo in support of the aviation industry down there, and we've been doing many training programs, certificate programs for aviation management and other things, both with the airlines consortium with LATAM, Azul, and GOL, but also working with ANAC and SAC to provide training programs for them, because we have, you know, Embry-Riddle's got a lot of aviation experience throughout the years, and all the programs, we've got over 100 degree programs that we offer in the aviation sector, from the pilot training right through to engineering to business and all other sectors. We can take that content and provide the support to the industry. And we've seen that in Brazil. Brazil has been very receptive to the programs that we have to offer in terms of the management. We're also looking at other sectors, which is outside, is the aviation English, air traffic control training, and for aviation English and the safety and security that's related to that. So I think, you know, there's a lot of opportunity that we have with the experience we have behind us that we can help support the industry come through this. And it does get back to training. I mean, training can, even though the industry is down at the moment because of COVID-19 and all the factors that related to that, but we can look to the future and put other programs and training in. We can't stop training just because of disaster, because it doesn't pick up that quickly. We can continue the training to look to the future.
We can always have an optimistic view, right? Before the crisis, we were worried about the lack of pilots. Mm-hmm. Now we can prepare again and train again, so this won't happen in anytime soon.
Well, we're also looking at, because one of the our pilot program was at its all-time high. We were actually capping the number of students coming into the pilot program, both our Daytona and Prescott campuses, back in October. And even now we've got, the interest is still high. We're looking to see what the melt will be coming into the fall for the industry to it. But the one message that we always give is, you know, a young pilot coming in now, an 18-year-old, 19-year-old coming in to train for a pilot program. With Embry-Riddle, it's a 4-year degree program that includes the flight ratings that they get. So 4 years from now, that demand for pilots will be there. There's a natural cycle, there's the retirement, and then the new and the demand for pilots coming into the industry. And by 2023, 2024, we look that the industry will be back, and then the number of the traffic will be back there, so the demand will be there. So it's encouraging young people to look to the future, not just look at the current time and the COVID-19, what happens after that.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we are coming to the end. And before final remarks, I would like to do a last round of questions and talk a little bit about the future. I have a question to Fabio and Rafael, because both of you have a lot of experience with airport infrastructure. What do you think it will be like? What is your prediction for the future? First of all, when do you think demand will be back? And from the airport infrastructure perspective, what do you think it will change? Or do you think that after the pandemic, after a vaccine or a treatment, nothing will change?
Rafael, you wanna start, or can I start? Oh, I apologize to taking the word always first.
Don't worry, go ahead.
All right. So this is I mean, we have to look at the future with various perspectives, and I've seen predictions, and ICAO has published a lot of studies on economic impact with regards to aviation, due to the COVID. And I've seen curve shapes that I had never learned in my engineering school. So we have the V shape, the U shape, the L shape, the W shape. I knew the S shape, but these are the ones that we're going to say how the trend is going to react throughout the time. The biggest concerns are with regards to themes, including that John has just mentioned. Personnel. I mean, we have people being laid off right now, and at some point you're going to need these. You need people trained and capable of doing that. And to have capable people, you need to have people who are willing to get in a system that at this moment is looking bad, but we know when we do expect that to react. So you need time for that. And this is planning process as well. This demands a lot of planning capacity to generate the resources that are going to be needed for the reaction time, because naturally a lot of people might not be up to date with their training, or new incomers for their works and jobs might need to be adequately trained for some time before they can actually respond to the demand that we will have. The other concerns with regards to competition, I mean, we're seeing that some airlines are shutting down operations, or ground handlers are being impacted, and competition is going to be the main course to guarantee the adequate and accessible service that aviation has been drawn to throughout the last years. I mean, it's been a whole process that we have been looking for. And within Latin America, as Rafael mentioned, we had a huge plan that was, and a huge demand from the states to move forward with increasing connectivity. A great part of that was based on increasing the number of service and the service providers and increasing the number of airlines and guaranteeing adequate infrastructure. And suddenly we're seeing that this number might decrease a lot. So these are big concerns that we have throughout the time to be able to be ready for the increase of the demand that we will have for sure, and guarantee this on a safe and secure manner. This process might take a while, but the need for the states and the industry to be prepared and generate this level of awareness and grade of preparation between jobs and looking into responding to the demand that we need, as well as increasing the attractiveness of our region for new airlines and for new investors to come here and put their resources into aviation is going to be a big challenge. But it's something that I think once the demand starts to increase again, we're going to be able to respond throughout the time. Over to you, Rafael.
Yeah. Yes, one of the things that we are basically saying is that we have to be sensible here, okay? Here, of course, the magic wand is going to be the vaccine, okay? Once we have the vaccine, things will change dramatically here because, you know, all this physical distancing, the need to wear the mask and all these things will, with time, you know, disappear, okay? So the vaccine is very important. Why do I say that? Because it is normal that people, you know, get very excited and start saying, you know, we have to separate flows, we have to expand the facilities. Listen, it is a fact of life that to maintain 1.5 or 2 meter distance around every single individual is impossible, okay? Not in airports, not in a metro, not in a bus, nowhere. I mean, the sizing of the facilities would have to be so tremendous that there is no money in the world to pay for that, okay? And I'm emphasizing that because, you know, as you very well know, these things are mentioned, okay? I mean, ensuring that there is physical distance. Well, I can tell you right now, right here, that is not possible, okay? And that is why I like the regulations coming from organizations like EASA, which is the FAA of Europe, where they say, if possible, you know, maintain the distance, you know, but do not enforce it because it is impossible, okay? Now, so we have, that's what I'm saying, we have to be sensible. Listen, airports like aircraft are very expensive beasts, okay? I mean, before I left my airport in Jamaica, a relatively small airport, 5 million passengers. For the next 5 years, we were going to be spending over $200 million, okay? So, I mean, that gives you a sense of the amount of money. So, you know, so we have to be sensible. You know, we have to really ensure that we do things with a sure footing, okay? And that, once again, we use technology. Technology, I think, is going to be very, very important. We encourage governments to open up to technology. We know that there is this relationship, technology equals fewer jobs. You know, let's not look at it that way, okay? Let's not, because if we keep on going thinking along those lines, we will not get anywhere. Use of technology, sensible ideas, you know, and understanding that things will change.
Thank you, Rafael. As always, there is a positive side. We all know, and we have been talking for the last 3 months, that this is the largest crisis in the history of the sector. But I think we have huge opportunities. Talking about airports and airlines, I think it's a huge opportunity to become more efficient. For example, I think that we're going to see airports much more efficient, touchless. There are going to be new procedures for baggage, for passengers to board planes. And I hope this works and it happens soon. John, let me get back to you. I would like to hear you about the recovery, what you think, as well as which core activities other than higher education is Embry-Riddle able to deliver to the industry to help it recover and grow. Research initiatives, professional education programs. If you could talk a little bit about that.
So the latter there, the professional education is critical, because there's a lot of demand now for what we call stackable credentials. So rather than having a full degree, you can get a professional education certificate that helps and not be out of the workforce for doing that. So that is something that we've been pushing a lot in terms of working with many companies to do that out there. We also look at education from the early age onward. So we have to attract young people into the aviation industry and show that it is going to be a rewarding career. It is cyclical, yes, but the cyclical is still continues to climb. So we've been starting to push back into dual enrollment type programs in the high school and promote what we call MOOCs, massive open online courses, to young people in terms of aviation awareness, aviation's future, things that attract the young people into that, to see that there is a future into it. So, and so that's the early part, to get that future workforce, the next generation coming through into the aviation sector. But research is always there. I mean, we're as part of a university. I mean, the core piece of a university is not just educating young people, it's also having the experience and doing the research to help to the future. And I think it relates to what both Fabio and Rafael are saying, is that, you know, the future is the changing of how the airports, the layout of airports, the processing of going through airports, that is all going to change. And it takes research and it takes time to do that, and what better place than coming from an academic institution. You know, we did just recently completed a research program with LATAM on fatigue. It was on the flight from Sao Paulo to Manila, looking at because there was an aspect of fatigue that was going through the ANAC and SAC on that. And so we contributed to supporting that. So research is critical, and then it's working with the agencies, working with you know, ICAO and IATA and others to help support that to get for the future.
Thank you. Very interesting. I didn't know about this fatigue experience. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of this webinar, which in my opinion was amazing. I could stay here for a lot more time. And I would like to ask each of you for your final remarks. Fabio, starting with you always. Alphabetical order.
Oh, thank you so much. Once again, thank you for the invitation. Congratulations for the initiative, both you, Paula, and all your team. I believe these are the kind of talks that we need to constantly do, and this whole situation generated our capacity to build on these streaming communication processes. It's always part of this reality in the world. As in Brazil, we say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And we are sure that aviation is going to come out stronger in this process, both in our capacity to dialogue and talk and communicate and be a lot more humble in the process of leadership. This is part of what we have to understand. There's not one that's going to save the world, but that's something that we have to build together. So I think from out of this whole process, states, countries, industry, and other stakeholders are getting together. And I hope that this kind of attitude continues throughout the years that come. And obviously, we see the opportunities as well as improving our aviation sector. And as you mentioned, Ricardo, there are a lot of things that have been stranded throughout the years because we couldn't do. Due to this situation, if you don't want to have queues, you don't want to have people gather in a small place, or anyways impacted and generated additional processes that could be handled by technology and regulation or guidelines standards that have been established in Annex 9 of facilitation by ICAO. We could take this moment also to implement them after so many years that they have been established. So I think we can work together on this, and I'm really glad that I have participated. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us, Fabio. John, please, your final remarks.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here and speaking on this. Aviation is a global industry. Aviation is an industry that brings the world together in many ways, and it's important that we continue to create a strong industry for that, not just for business travel, but for pleasure and vacation spots. But everything relates to it as from our point is education and training, and I think that's where we come from, is to make sure that we can create a safe environment, a secure environment, and contribute to getting that next generation of aviation professional into the industry, to show that it is an industry that that's rewarding and has a lot of potential, and it brings that global aspect together and as we go forward. So anything that we can do to get that young person, next generation in there and contribute to it, we will continue to do that and support the industry through the training and all the aspects that we can give it through research as well. So I appreciate being with my colleagues here and discussing this. Give it COVID-19 that brought it together, but I think the future looks bright as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for joining us today. Rafael, please, your final remarks.
Okay, well, thank you once again very, very much for the invite. Challenging times ahead, definitely. Okay, no question about that. But as my colleagues were saying, basically light at the end of the tunnel. But for that to happen, of course, we have to roll up our sleeves and really make it happen. Okay, it will not happen just by inspiration. Okay, it will have to happen by working hard. Very, very encouraged, extremely encouraged, I can tell you, with the collaboration between industry and regulators. And I will reemphasize the incredible collaboration with ICAO and also between industry. That's something that we didn't say. I mean, for example, I don't know if you are familiar with the continuous fight that we have, a friendly conflict between airlines and airports. Okay, in this instance, we've come together. We've actually come up with documents jointly. That is very, very encouraging. We really hope that this will open up a new chapter in terms of the relationship, and of course, encouraging governments in the region, in particular in our region in Latin America, that aviation is absolutely essential for its social and economic development. Okay, and that I really hope that the leadership of people like Fabio, with a cool head, with understanding very clearly what is happening and what needs to be done, is what I really would like to see throughout the industry and of course throughout the region and around the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Rafael. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of the 9th webinar in the AirCOVID series, the impacts of COVID-19 in the future of aviation. I would like to take this opportunity to invite you to the last webinar we will be hosting in this series next Tuesday, June 16th, about the future of air transportation in Brazil. The discussion will happen in Portuguese. We will be joined by Diogo Oliveira, President of the National Association of Private Airports, Juliano Noman, Director General of the Brazilian Civil Aviation Agency, and Paulo Kakinoff, CEO of Go Airlines. And I will moderate this discussion. Once again, I would like to thank you, our guests, for joining us today, and as well as our viewers for their participation. Thank you very much. I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate each one of you, Rafael, Fabio, and John, for the amazing job you have done during these difficult times. Have a great week, and I hope to see you next Tuesday. Thank you.